March 23rd, 2017, Alice went into labor at Kabgayi Hospital in Rwanda. Her labor proceeded normally until all of a sudden she started to bleed. Within minutes, her doctors knew she needed an emergency transfusion of blood to survive. So they checked the stock on hand at the hospital, found they did not have enough blood of her type in stock. So they placed an emergency order, and despite the remoteness of this hospital only being accessible by dirt roads, the blood Alice needed arrived within 30 minutes. Using that blood, Alice's doctors were able to stabilize her, and later she went home with her beautiful baby boy, just like she would have if she lived here. 3 months later, Alice was back in the hospital. This time she had developed severe anemia due to malaria, again requiring an emergency transfusion of blood. And again, the blood Alice needed was delivered in time to save her life. In both of these cases, the blood Alice needed was delivered by a small autonomous aircraft we call a Zip. Recently, Alice visited us and had this to say.
I used to see the Zipline drone fly and people gathering around to watch. I would find it funny and think to myself, they must be mad. Until the same drone brought blood that saved my life.
I'm not a scientist or a doctor, and I definitely don't have some billion-dollar R&D budget to bring a medical breakthrough to the world. But I did lead the design of Zipline, a medical product delivery service. I'm a product designer and robotics engineer, and I believe that technology can do amazing things in this world, but only if geeks like me get out into the world, get close enough to really understand the important and often unsexy problems that need solving. So before we started Zipline, that's what we did. We got out into the world, spending a bunch of time in Central America and Africa getting to know people. We heard firsthand from doctors, typically in hard-to-reach areas, that it was too often impossible for them to get the medical supplies they needed. Doctors shared with us their torment at losing patients they knew how to save. They knew the treatments, they just didn't have the supplies. While traveling, we experienced firsthand some of the literal roadblocks that make reliable delivery in these parts of the world so damn hard. Dirt roads that turn to miles of mud in the long rainy seasons. You'll be traveling along, and where you expect a small creek, the waters have risen, and now there's a river that blocks your way for sometimes days at a time. We're sending things like vaccines and blood that require refrigeration to parts of the world that don't have reliable electricity. At this point in our journey, we were starting to dream of a radical solution to this medical delivery problem, but we were still skeptical, asking ourselves, could we actually help? Could we actually solve this problem? That's when we met a graduate student researcher named Zach. He was, at the time, a graduate student researcher at the Ifakara Health Institute in Tanzania. And Zach had invented a mobile phone-based system where doctors around the countryside of Tanzania could text him every time they needed a medical product to save someone's life. And that part of his system worked beautifully. His database listed thousands and thousands of patients next to the emergency medicine that they required to survive. But this was a dark moment for our team as we were staring at this huge database, because it was obvious this was a database of death. It listed the supplies they needed, but there was no reliable way to get those supplies to the doctors. Not long after meeting Zach, we visited a medical supply warehouse in another country. This photo was taken outside that warehouse. Boxes and boxes outside, stacked 2 stories high in many places. Of course, our question was, why are they storing all this medicine outside? The answer, unfortunately, is this is all expired medicine. All expired simply because there wasn't a way to get it to the people who needed it in time. Meeting Zach showed us the scale of the problem and its costs in human lives, but seeing this warehouse and others like it made it clear the medical supplies were available. And suddenly the problem we could solve, it just seemed so simple. Get these supplies from A to B, from these warehouses. The doctors needed them when they needed them. So at this point in our journey, we were really excited. We were going to revolutionize healthcare, transform logistics, save lives. It was all going to be easy. And of course, we were just about to find out how hard it was going to be. There were so many things we had to get right. Like, what type of drone even made sense for this kind of application? When we looked at this problem, we looked at it like the novices that we are, right? We're not public health experts. To a novice, all problems look simple. Why not deliver in a way that's instant? It doesn't require infrastructure like roads or bridges. Being the robotics geeks we are, we knew we could do this with drones. They could obviously fly over the missing roads, the missing bridges. But even more exciting, because delivery by drone could be so much faster and so much cheaper than delivery by road, we could deliver on demand. So no need to forecast months ahead of time what some remote clinic might need. No need to maintain thousands of refrigerators. No more blood expiring on the shelf. There were so many questions we had to get right to make this successful. What type of drone even made sense for this application? How would we take off, make deliveries, and land safely? How would we package the medicine for aerial delivery? How many flights per day would we need to make to actually do this at national scale? Through what kind of weather would we need to fly? And on and on and on. When we started this design process, now 4.5 years ago, our answers to every single one of those questions I just mentioned, and many more, were completely wrong. And I'm confident that there's one key reason we went from wrong to right on all those critical design decisions. And that's that we forced ourselves to get out into the world. It was our first customer countries who worked with us from the very beginning of our design process. And we counted on their feedback and their data for each critical decision. A couple of examples. When we started, we thought we could do this with an off-the-shelf drone that could serve a 20-kilometer service radius. But when we got the data on where the paved roads ended, of course we need a paved road to get our supply, relative to the locations of all the hospitals and clinics we needed to serve, it was obvious 20 kilometers was going to be useless. So we started from the ground up designing a platform that could serve an 80-kilometer service radius. When we started, our packaging looked like a sleeping bag in a stuff sack. But it fell so fast, hit the ground with such a thud, our customers literally jumped in surprise. Not the kind of surprise you want. When we started, we thought, we don't need to deliver during a storm if we can deliver just before and just after. But it was the doctors we were working with. It was our time spent in the field that made it really clear just what kind of weather we would have to survive. These are just a few of the many, many design decisions that we only got right because our customers pushed us there. We were in the real world, working with real doctors who did not have time to goof around with technology. We were either going to help them or slow them down, and of course, we did not want to slow them down. Getting our first distribution center up and running was a big challenge. Despite all of our testing here in our California-based test site, as you can imagine, when we got to the real world, we had more work to do. It took our Rwandan team and our California team working around the clock, but eventually things started to click. The system started to work, and this is what that system looks like operating in Rwanda today. Can you turn the lights down, please? When an order comes into our distribution center, our team pulls the ordered inventory from our on-site, the ordered products from our on-site inventory, in this case, blood. It's wrapped in a thermal-based insulation, passed out the window to our flight operators, put it into a zip, assemble that zip on the launcher, and then launch it. Now that zip is flying automatically out to the hospital through whatever weather and above whatever terrain, missing roads or missing bridges. And then moments before we make the delivery, we send a text message to the doctor saying, please step outside, your order has arrived. After completing the order, the zip turns around and flies automatically back to our distribution center, where it lands on a system that is probably best described as an aircraft carrier flipped upside down. Here's a slow-mo video of that in action. And since I'm in hopefully a relatively geeky audience, I'm showing another slow-mo video of that from another angle to make sure you're seeing what's happening. And just so you know what it looks like at actual speed, So at any given time in Rwanda, there can be a bunch of zips in the air making deliveries just like that to different parts of Rwanda. And now I'm going to try something well, this should be a little bit of fun. So this is a special treat for you guys. Give me 1 second. Abdul, all looks good on your end? Can you take the lights back down? All right. Let's see if this works. Abdul, are you there? Is this working?
Yeah, I'm here.
Excellent. So,
Can you hear me?
welcome to Rwanda. This is Abdul. He is the founding member of our Rwandan team. He's been here since before our first flights, and believe me when I tell you, our first flights would not have happened if Abdul hadn't made them happen. So, Abdul, meet everybody here at UC Berkeley. And Abdul is going to give us a tour of the live operation in Rwanda.
Okay, great. So let me switch my camera. Okay, hello everyone, and this is our distribution center in Rwanda. In front of me, this is the equipment where we keep blood and blood products. And here you can see the battery and smart charger charging. Keenan can explain more. And then here, so like you can see in front of me the launcher and the recovery system, which Keenan will just show you guys. Let's start by the fulfillment. So when you receive an order from the hospital, what happened is we have medical products in those fridge. So we have this is an incubator. This is the fridge, and this is the freezer. So we have 4 medical products: the precipitated, the red blood cell, the plasma, and the ether. So when we receive an order, so this is by the way, meet William. He's a fulfillment operator. So when we receive an order, those guys will get the medical product, which the hospital requested, and then as Keenan was saying, those products are measured and then wrapped in fermenting paper, and then all those are packed in a box with a parachute, and then with a box with some inflated material to make sure that when the vehicle drops the package, there is the impact on that they have on the ground is reduced. So he's going through the process. The system is pretty smart. Nothing. You just need to scan the products. This is a system also built by Zipline, and then this is going to ship automatically the blood products to the flight or to a natural vehicle. So we can avoid scenarios where someone may mistake and send blood to their own hospital. So to avoid that, it's all done automatically using the QR code. So we're wrapping up. So when this is done, the next step is to put the package in put the product in this box, and then he add also transmission kits, because sometimes the hospital don't have it, and then that whole package is handed to the flight operation outside. Let me go to the other end.
So this is it's about 6:30 p.m. in Rwanda right now. It's the end of their nominal day is 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Although we will do night flights in certain situations, and so you're seeing the operation towards the end of their day. He mentioned.
Yeah,
that,
so
go ahead.
Go ahead. We have a vehicle already on the launcher, ready to go. So maybe I can go back to how we associate the package to the flight. But if you want, you can start basically show them the flight, how the launch.
Yeah,
because we have
we don't want to hold you guys up. Go ahead and keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, so as this is Abubakar, and he's a flight operator at NS1. You still see my video, by the way?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So what he's doing is he's performing the pre-flight checks, where basically he's checking because the vehicle does a lot of software checks, but also we do a lot of software checks. So he's going to move, he's going to command the aircraft to move sorry, go ahead. Okay, they're still doing it. Yeah. Okay, they're gonna. I think they have to. You have to restart again. Okay. Oh, so Keenan, sorry, they have to restart the pre-flight checks.
That's totally fine. I think it would be really interesting for you to give sort of a little bit of a behind-the-scenes tour, so that I think a lot of people, I'm hoping there's a lot of geeks in the audience like me are interested in how this thing actually works. Maybe even show off like the fault tolerant power systems.
We have an aircraft coming for recovery, so that also something that we're looking at. We're waiting for this aircraft and want to get ready. So this is the recovery system, as Keenan was mentioning. So this is a system built also by Zipline, and then you can see, here we're just going up. So we have 4 motors, two like the top ones act as to move the poles up and down, and then we have 2 side ones which capture the aircraft. So as soon as the aircraft is sending information to the recovery system, which you have 2 cabinets here. One is for the power, another one is the bunch of electronics, and that's the one which runs the software. So those information are translated by the beacon we have, and then they're sent over to the recovery system, and then the recovery system actually knows where the aircraft is. So the aircraft will try to fly through the line. So it's kind of imagine of a smart, like you see how they catch airplane on aircraft carriers, but more like dynamic, where you can track and know where the position, the velocity, and the heading of the aircraft in real time. So the vehicle tries to fly through that line as soon as the vehicle can pass. So we have a tail hook, a really tiny tail hook, almost at the edge of the tail, of the tail boom, and then that line is going to it's so fast. It's going to snap the aircraft from the sky, and then as soon as the aircraft gets have been caught by the recovery system, as soon as it takes the deceleration, that is going to deactivate or end the flight mode of the aircraft, and then the aircraft is going to swing. This recovery system have a control system on board which.
Oh, come on. Hey, Abdul, we just lost you.
Yeah.
Oh, now you're back.
Oh, sorry.
We lost you for a second.
Do I need to start something or?
No, go ahead. It's working.
Sorry.
It's working.
So I was planning as soon as the aircraft detects that it has been caught by, it detects the deceleration, it's going to deactivate the flight mode, and then it stops flying and spinning the motors, and the operator will have to push a button on the side, and that is going to drop the aircraft to a height where it can be moved by an operator. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it, and let's see it in action. So hopefully it's going to be quick. So you can see the beautiful wingtips flashing in front of me. It's pretty dark. So and then the vehicle is going to come in, and landing final. Here we go. Here we go. Beautiful.
So one fun thing to point out in the background, you'll see a little tower in the background. That's where our pilot sits. So the pilot, we call it a controller. That pilot's overseeing all of our vehicles in the air at any given time. I think right now in Rwanda, we've maxed out at about 8 vehicles flying at once. Has a direct radio communication to Kigali air traffic control, which is the Capitol Airport air traffic control tower, where we have our UTM installed in their tower. And now you're seeing them. This is how they pop a plane apart to then get the battery back in the charger and then get that plane back into operation.
Yeah. If you're interested to know the tailhole, how tiny it is. It's a really precise maneuver. Oh, good. Yeah, they just told me that they're ready for the flight checks. So what's going to happen is going to scan those QR codes on top of the aircraft, and then using an iPhone, he's going to command the aircraft to move the control services. So we have using computer vision, and then that is basically checking the deflection angle and any other mechanical failure which may happen to to those different control services.
Can you get him? Well, he's probably in a hurry to get this plane up. But basically, this is using the camera in the plane, and automatically, as you see the control surfaces, they're doing a little dance. That's to check calibration and backlash and things like that. And we've automated a lot of little things like that, most of which you're not going to see in this run through because they've already done them, just to make sure that these planes are airworthy before we put them up.
And then the last step is he's going to spin those. He's going to spin the motors and then launch the aircraft. So we don't have like launch rail. So this is used like it's used to accelerate the vehicle from 0 to 30 meters per second. And then it's only we're using motors and capacitors to accelerate it, and then we have a really big one, a big motor which launch. Here we go. So yeah, go on.
I love watching them fly into the night.
So as Ken was mentioning, in front of me, this is the closeness where our controller sits, and then he's talking to command the aircraft does. And then he's like in constant communication. I can show him. I can show you guys what he's doing. Zipline app that shows where the aircraft is, and then where it's heading, and different, the position, the battery consumption, and the heading. All that are being shared with the air traffic control. So meet Axel. He's a controller. So you can see this is the app. So it's running on an iPad. So you can definitely see a lot of information. The flight ID, the flight time, the kind of like we a lot on GPS, the position, the altitude, and different other things like the timestamp and the recovery site. So all those information, all those are built by Zipline. And
Abdul,
you see like routes. Sure.
I think it might be interesting. Well, a couple of things to note. On the right, those are all the zips in the air right now. And on the left, he's just zoomed out. Can you zoom out all the way to show the Rwanda scale? So that's essentially we call it the sky map. That's our routes that these planes use to get to these hospitals.
It's coming pretty big, so it's hard to see all the routes.
I'll show you what that looks like on a map of Rwanda. But you're basically looking at the entire western half of the country right now. And then you can jump into any of the planes and see them. You can actually see, if you can look very carefully, I think it looks like way far on the left there. That's actually one of our hardest to reach delivery sites. There's a plane about to deliver. Am I seeing that right, Abdul?
Yeah, there's one at where is it? I think there's one just finished delivering. So, but it's a really far hospital. Like, if you try to look at the scale, look how much you have to travel to get to the nest. So this is like 40 minutes for the aircraft, but that would be like 6 hours for a drive, and then you don't know
when it's not ready
because sometimes you don't have like roads to get there.
One thing I'll mention is we talked about an 80-kilometer service radius for the vehicles. Our longest routes can be as long as 100 kilometers because obviously we can't fly over every mountain peak. We got to pick valleys and mountain passes. If you're talking about sort of the typical statistics of a drone, if you look up on a website, a drone stat. There's another plane coming to land. When I say typical statistics, what I mean is like if on a nice day, sea level, flying straight, no wind, etc. Our range flying straight is close to 400 kilometers. To give you a sense of the kind of margin we have to carry to do this kind of operation all day, all weather, with margin. Yeah, so a couple other fun things you might notice there. Lightning towers all around to protect the operation. We operate through storms. And we have backup power systems on top of backup power systems to keep this thing operating and keep blood refrigerated and so on. Anyway, thank you so much, Abdul. This worked out great. Thank you for making it happen.
Okay, boom.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. I'm glad that worked out. So let me dive right into a few numbers. We've been doing this for 2 years, almost to the day, actually. Our 2-year anniversary was Monday. We've flown over 500,000 kilometers in Rwanda doing commercial deliveries. As of last night, we've done almost 10,000 flights delivering over 18,000 units of blood. This is the operation that we started with in Rwanda. This is the distribution center you were just at, and the Z in the middle there. We've been delivering blood to hospitals. And right now we're going through a big transition as we start delivering vaccines and pharmaceuticals, not just to hospitals, but also to health clinics, which are all the white dots, as well as scaling up our second distribution center on the other half of the country. We've just broken ground on our first distribution center in Ghana. Hopefully the size of the circles relative to the country give you a sense that Ghana is a much, much bigger country. It's a very exciting challenge for us. Our first phase there is 4 distribution centers, which will bring about 20 million people in Ghana within range of on-demand delivery. These are interesting stats to share with the drone audience. From the healthcare perspective, there's a stat that really drives home how powerful this can be in operation. Blood is a scarce resource in Rwanda, just as it is here. Red blood cells have a shelf life of 40 days from the time of donation, right, then through transport, testing, and then use. So it's always a rare commodity. In Rwanda, of the over 18,000 units of blood we've delivered, less than 5 have expired, which is an efficiency that has never been achieved anywhere in the world, definitely not in the United States. It's just so powerful because every unit of blood that doesn't expire is used, it's needed. Today, this is the largest drone delivery network in the world. As far as we know, it's the largest autonomous delivery network of any kind in the world. But more importantly, this drone delivery network is solving the medical delivery problem. It's a solution to a problem that can improve healthcare for billions of people, and it did not require some breakthrough in medical science. Most medical breakthroughs don't make it to most people in the world for very practical reasons. Reliable delivery is only one such practical barrier. If you're like me, passionate about solving important problems, and I am confident you can have an impact like we did by just taking the same path we did. Just get out in the world. The world is smaller than ever. It's easier than ever to get out into all corners of the world. Find and understand a problem you're passionate about solving, and then find great first customers who will take bold steps with you to solve that problem, and then iterate with them, work with them to find a great solution to another practical barrier to quality healthcare. When I think about the impact a delivery network like this could have operating at global scale, I think of the world's experience with polio. Today, more than 50 years after the invention of the polio vaccine, we are still working to eradicate the disease. We have the medicine, we just haven't solved all the practical barriers to get it everywhere it's needed. If we each solve one of those practical barriers, the next life-saving vaccine could achieve worldwide eradication in months, not decades. The next outbreak could be contained in days, not months. And someday we can be sure that no patient ever has to die simply because the life-saving treatment that exists didn't reach them in time. Thank you. Did I use up all my time?
Hi, it was an amazing presentation. Thank you for the treat, and I really enjoyed it. And it's really inspiring to see companies like yours doing such great work. How do you think about partnerships with other providers, like partners on the ground, like telemedicine and Medic Mobile and things
Absolutely. We love it. We solve a very narrow part of this problem, and we work with anybody who is excited to work with us to solve the greater problem. And we have projects like that in Rwanda, and we have partnerships in the works in many other countries we're developing contractual relationships with going forward. And so, yeah.
Also regarding the technology, I just had, how do you see the technology developing in terms of reach in the range?
Sure. So it's a really interesting question. Right now, we're actually focused not so much on just range. We're actually focused on operational scale. We have governments who'd like us to be doing hundreds of flights per day from one distribution center. Now we're doing 20 to 50 from this one, and with that scaling we're doing in Rwanda, we'll get to a few hundred deliveries per day. It's one of those tricky things. The farther your range is, the less on demand you are, and of course, this distribution center you see in Rwanda serves a patient population of about 4 million people. So as we expand to deliver for more and more medical use cases, there's a good chance it makes more sense for us to have more distribution centers rather than longer range.
So the question here at the back.
Sorry?
So the work you're doing is fantastic. There's so many questions we can ask. I want to ask 2 questions if we have time. So can you talk a little bit about the hurdles that you have to jump through on the government side for your first customer?
That's not a short answer. Where to start? I mean, the way we do this with Rwanda and the way we're doing this now with Ghana and other countries is we start by working with the ministries of health to develop the economic and health impact use case. So this is a data-based analysis of the integration of a system like this. And then from there, we let the Ministry of Health, once they have that database analysis in hand, go to the other branches. Everybody from the executive has to sign off in almost every country. The Department of Defense usually has to sign off. Obviously, we have to then negotiate an airspace integration plan with the Civil Aviation Authority. A lot of people assume that the regulations are more lax in Rwanda. Believe me, they are not. The ICAO, which harmonizes airspace standards across the world, well, in some ways is very strict with Africa because in the 80s and 90s, well, they struggled a lot with commercial aircraft crashes there. So anyway, that's the short version.
One other question.
The long version takes about 18 months to explain.
So you're saving lives, and there is no dollar amount that can be assigned to this. But at some point, you have to make money. Can you talk a little bit about how you generate your revenue? Sure.
So our contract with Rwanda at the top, literally in big letters, says courier agreement. We are a courier service to the government of Rwanda. It's a monthly fee that we charge, yeah, the details of it are quite complicated, but we're able to charge something we think, well, that we're very close to showing positive unit economics on now, and obviously as a startup, that's where you want to get to really start scaling. So that's what we're focused on. But yeah, another great question with a very long answer. Sorry, I can't get to it at the moment.
That was actually my question on the, do you have an idea of the cost of the delivery that you have? And you're saying, though, the government is supporting these efforts. And what's your idea for scaling to other countries? Because I'm thinking there's application also in the US, in Alaska, for instance, where there's...
Sure. When we have a big effort going with the FAA through their IPP program. When you're thinking about costs in the Western world, think about low hundreds of dollars for a delivery. It's going to be a lot more expensive to operate here for a lot of reasons. But that to ballpark it for you, that's where we are.
Have you considered branching out to other medical needs?
Absolutely. So, like I said, we're starting with vaccines and pharma right now, and we'll see when we get there. But we have a lot. Rwanda, Ghana, and Tanzania all have these programs called village health worker programs, where they basically train a matriarch of a small town that's not big enough to have its own clinic on a short list of things like anti-malarial, antiretroviral for AIDS, and things like that. And now they're struggling to keep those people stocked. So that's another layer. I showed you the health clinics, In Rwanda, we're going from 30 hospitals to about 500 health clinics. Then there'll be about 3,000 community health workers. And then there's a lot of other really interesting parts of this problem we'd like to help solve. One of the cool things about HIV medication now is it works. And now these countries, but only if you're on it with a very rigid regimen, right? So even a week of going off of your HIV medication, you can develop immune disorders and massive complications. And so because these things are working, they're now dealing with aging populations who have HIV, who are struggling to reliably go get their meds. And so being able to deliver directly to homes for people like that. So there's a lot of things that we're looking ahead towards basically getting people the supplies they need.
Would you say you're looking more into new use cases or more into new locations, I guess?
I guess a little bit of both. Right now, we don't look very seriously outside of medicine and medical supplies. The need there is just so big, and so it's a global need that we are like scratching the little corner of right now. And it's going to take our company a huge amount of focus and a massive scale to even get to like 5 or 10% of that demand over the coming years. So we're focused.
I'm curious whether you've done any work on the tracking
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting challenge for us. Obviously, like the short version of the question, as I would say, is: Are you looking at how to track these medical supplies through the supply chain, and provide transparency on what's going on with that? And it's a big part of what we do. It was one of a long list of things we didn't intend to do when we started. But in order to get these contracts, there's many reasons you need that transparency. All these countries have very aggressive anti-corruption campaigns, things like that, providing auditable traceability. So you saw that system in action a little bit, where we trace every unit of blood all the way through the system. They can recall if they need to, just like you can here. And one of the reasons this is another side effect of not having to forecast by keeping supply more centralized until you know where you need it, is you have fewer points where the supply is. So it just dramatically simplifies the tracking problem. So absolutely. It'll start to change. It'll start to change. We'll have to see. It's a great question. It's something we're grappling with.
Yeah, quick flight test question for all the engineers in the crowd. Do you see a larger payload version coming in the future? It looked like this was about 2 units of blood payload max.
Yeah, so we have a slightly improved version coming that'll get us to about 3 to 4 units, depending on the units. That's coming out early next year. It's not a huge priority for us. This is 3 to 4 units is the sweet spot for us. 90% of orders for blood are filled by one plane with 3 to 4 units, which is why we're targeting that. We do have orders even today where we just send 2 or 3 planes if it's a mass casualty event or something. And it's an optimization challenge. Things get this vehicle, in case it wasn't clear, is pretty big already, and with Aero, every little bit you kind of go up that chain, it gets harder. Not just to make the plane more expensive, but the safety case and the engineering that goes into the safety of an operation like this and the vehicle like this just gets exponentially harder as you get bigger. That's actually the reason that cake box is so big, is for the pharmaceutical case. So the weight is actually set off the blood case, the volume is set off the pharmaceutical case. And this is based off basically a bunch of data modeling we did with data from 5 different countries to really understand basically what size really made sense for us. And the multiple drop-off, like doing multiple drops in one flight, maybe that's down the road, but so far all the data we have set for on-demand delivery, which is really what they want out of us, it's just the chances you have 2 deliveries in the same direction at the same time is just small. Exactly. So this is what we might reevaluate. But right now we follow the KISS rule and yeah.
Just curious, when you got your program up and running and you started your first of 10,000 flights, looks like you're going through all kinds of weather. Do you have any losses out of 10,000? Any aircraft loss, or I'm just curious about that risk?
Sure. So the aircraft is equipped with a secondary landing system, a giant parachute. And so we've definitely, and that's a fully automated system, and that's definitely been come into play. It's a tricky thing for us because when you're near the equator, weather is very random and very localized. In our first week of operation, 2 years ago now, we said, we're not going to fly in any rain, just for the first week. And of course, we got our hands on every weather data set we could. And sure enough, beautiful day, no signs of weather, planes coming back soaking wet. And so this has been a big push for us, is weather fault tolerance, basically weather robustness, margin to weather is another way of putting it. But we fly over we have a route where we're literally climbing a kilometer, losing a kilometer, climbing another kilometer, losing another kilometer, just on the outbound leg. And when you go through those mountain passes, that's part of the reason we carry that parachute. It's the catch-all for when you just can't handle it in the vehicle. Outside of parachute landings? No. We engineer. I won't use the term. We put a lot of effort into engineering that parachute system. It's literally built with to automotive grade. Anyway, we can get into details. It was a big effort. Some of them get scuffed up on a parachute land, but that's part of we didn't get into the details of this, but a lot of what you're seeing behind the scenes is a ridiculous level of modularity to make the field service really, really practical.
I'll ask one question. So we are so lucky to have two high schooler or middle schooler here with David. And the kids looking at your background, you had the privilege to go to Johns Hopkins, then Stanford. So I'm sure they are privileged to be here. And what's your motivational kind of advice to the folks, like the places you are trying to do this kind of work, to get them involved? That would be great to hear from you.
Sure. For me, you just find something you care a lot about. That's really what it came down to. That's how Ross started. It was, 100 or 200 pitches to fundraisers before we had the first person who was like, oh yeah, we want to start funding an open source robotics operating system, right? And you got to just be passionate about it. And if you are, eventually you'll find people who you connect with on the customer side, on the funding side, and then it's just a lot of fun. And the benefit of being rejected a million times, is you learn how to communicate what you're talking about, and you really hone what you're doing.
In the beginning, did you lose any UAVs to just weather before you had the automated parachute system?
Oh, absolutely. Part of the reason, before we started operating in Rwanda, we did 5 or 6 major generations of the aircraft. The first generation didn't have the parachute landing system, and it flew for about 30 minutes in its entire life of that generation. And the next generation of aircraft had a parachute landing system, and it was a great tool to have to enable rapid development at our test sites to really get the system worked out without having to build planes all the time.
So thank you. Obviously, the technology is there, right? The sky's the limit. Do you see? I see some limitation in terms of what can be delivered is great, but also I see in terms of hospitals in Africa, there is certain medical procedure that cannot be completed because they don't have this specific skill set, right? So do you see in Rwanda, for example, that the government is talking about maybe reshuffling those, or maybe getting all specialized doctors to certain hospitals so they can do those procedures? Or are they like the Congress here, they're good at doing nothing?
Right now we're playing catch up. Right now doctors have way more skills than they have the supplies to execute on those skills. There has been a little bit of that in Rwanda. Some of the hospitals we're delivering to aren't used to having, they used to have only very generic red blood cells. Now that we deliver blood cells, plasma platelets, and so on. In Rwanda, their education campaign that they did was faster than our ability to scale up to those hospitals. So we were still playing catch up. So it's there, but the bigger problem right now, I think, is that you have these doctors who are all trained as at least sort of general practitioners, And so they have this nominal breadth of skill. And so just getting them all the supplies they need to exercise that breadth of skill is a big game of catch up right now.
Please join me in thanking Keenan for this beautiful and inspiring talk.
Pleasure.